Most people think memory loss comes from aging, from genetics, from things that happen inside the brain that are largely out of their control. But one of the most powerful predictors of how fast your memory declines after 60 has nothing to do with your genes, your diet, or even your sleep. It has to do with how many meaningful human connections you have in your life and how often you experience them. In March 2026, a study published in a major medical journal found that older adults who experienced both loneliness and social isolation had up to 8 times the risk of cognitive decline compared to those who felt genuinely connected. 8 times. Not 8% more, 8 times more likely. And yet loneliness is almost never discussed as a brain health issue. We talk about diet, exercise, sleep, vitamins. We rarely talk about the fact that a person who eats well, sleeps enough, and exercises regularly, but spends most of their time alone without meaningful connection, may be doing more damage to their memory than almost any other lifestyle factor could cause. Today I'm going to explain exactly what loneliness does to the aging brain, why the damage is so serious and so fast, and what you can do, starting today, to protect your memory through the most underrated medicine available to any human being: genuine human connection. My name is Dr. Elena, and every week I bring you practical, science-based information on cognitive health and memory for people over 60. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Before we go further, I want to make an important distinction, because there are 2 different things that are often confused, and they affect the brain in different ways. The first is social isolation, the objective, measurable fact of having few or infrequent social contacts. You live alone. You don't see people regularly. Your daily interactions are minimal. The second is loneliness, the subjective feeling of disconnection. You can be surrounded by family and still feel profoundly lonely. You can live alone and feel completely at peace. They are different conditions, even though they often occur together. Both are dangerous for the brain, but they work through slightly different mechanisms. Social isolation starves the brain of the stimulation it needs to maintain neural connections. Loneliness, the feeling itself, triggers a chronic stress response that, over time, is directly toxic to brain tissue. When both occur at the same time, the damage compounds into something the research describes as deeply alarming. Let me explain the neuroscience of what actually happens inside the brain when a person experiences chronic loneliness. When the brain perceives social isolation, either real or felt, it activates the same threat detection systems it would use to respond to a physical danger. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, becomes hyperactive. Cortisol levels rise. The nervous system shifts into a persistent state of low-grade alert. This is the body's ancient evolutionary response to being separated from the group, because for our ancestors, social exclusion was genuinely life-threatening. The problem is that this stress response was designed for short-term threats, not for years of chronic activation. When it runs continuously, as it does in people who are chronically lonely, it does lasting damage to the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. Research has shown that people with chronically high loneliness scores have measurably smaller hippocampal volumes over time. The stress of feeling disconnected is literally shrinking the part of the brain responsible for forming and storing memories. But the damage does not stop there. Chronic loneliness also increases systemic inflammation, the same low-grade, persistent inflammation we have discussed in previous videos that contributes to amyloid plaque buildup and accelerates neurodegenerative processes. A study published in 2024 found that social isolation elevates inflammatory markers called cytokines, and that this inflammatory cascade directly accelerates the brain changes associated with Alzheimer's disease. There is also a neural connectivity effect that is worth understanding. The brain is a use it or lose it organ. The neural pathways involved in language, memory, reasoning, and emotional processing are actively maintained through social engagement. Conversation requires you to listen, process, retrieve information from memory, formulate responses, and read emotional cues, all in real time. This is an intense cognitive workout that happens naturally in the course of meaningful social interaction. When that interaction disappears, those neural pathways receive less stimulation and begin to weaken. This is why socially isolated older adults show faster decline across virtually every measure of cognitive function, independent of other health factors. Now let me tell you something that often surprises people: the difference between the quantity and the quality of social contact. Research consistently shows that what matters for brain health is not how many people you see, but how meaningful and reciprocal those interactions are. A person who has brief, superficial exchanges throughout the day, but has no one who truly knows them or engages with them at any real depth, can still experience the cognitive damage of loneliness. The brain does not count interactions. It measures depth, safety, and genuine reciprocity. This is important because many older adults tell themselves they are not lonely because they have family around or because they leave the house every day. But if those interactions feel hollow, obligatory, or one-sided, the brain still registers disconnection. And if that feeling is consistent, the neurological consequences are the same. The good news, and there is real good news here, is that the brain responds to genuine connection in exactly the opposite direction. Meaningful social engagement activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, compounds that reduce inflammation, lower cortisol, and directly support the neural processes involved in memory and learning. Genuine human connection is, quite literally, a neuroprotective medicine, and it is available to everyone. Here are 5 practical ways to protect your memory through connection, starting this week. The first is to prioritize depth over frequency. 1 meaningful conversation per week, a real one, where you feel heard and where you are genuinely interested in the other person, does more for your brain than 7 brief, superficial interactions. Think about who in your life allows you to be fully yourself, and make time for them deliberately. The second is to find a group with a shared purpose. Groups organized around a common activity, a book club, a walking group, a religious community, a volunteer organization, provide something that random social contact cannot: repeated, structured interaction with the same people over time. This is the condition under which deep connection develops most naturally. The activity itself matters less than the consistency and the shared investment. The third is to reach out first. One of the most consistent findings in loneliness research is that lonely people tend to wait for others to initiate contact, and this waiting reinforces isolation. The brain interprets the absence of outreach as evidence that others don't care, which deepens the sense of disconnection. Making the first move, a phone call, a message, an invitation, breaks this cycle, and it tends to feel much harder than it actually is. The fourth is to treat technology as a bridge, not a destination. Video calls and messages can meaningfully reduce the distance between people. And for those with limited mobility or who live far from family, they are genuinely valuable. But they work best as supplements to in-person connection, not substitutes for it. Research shows that in-person interaction produces significantly stronger neurochemical benefits than screen-based communication. When in-person contact is possible, prioritize it. The fifth is to acknowledge loneliness honestly if you feel it. Many older adults feel shame about loneliness, as if it reflects a personal failure or a character flaw. It does not. Loneliness is a biological signal, as natural as hunger or thirst. It is the brain telling you that a fundamental human need is not being met. Acknowledging it honestly, to yourself, and if possible to someone you trust, is the first step toward addressing it. Suppressing or denying loneliness does not reduce its neurological impact. It only delays action. Let me bring it all together. Chronic loneliness and social isolation are not soft emotional problems. They are neurological threats with measurable, documented effects on brain structure and function. They raise cortisol and inflammation, shrink the hippocampus, weaken the neural pathways that maintain memory, and accelerate the brain changes associated with Alzheimer's disease. The risk increase for people who are both lonely and socially isolated is not marginal. Studies show it can be up to 8 times higher than for those who feel genuinely connected. The 5 ways to protect your brain. Prioritize depth over frequency in your relationships. Find a group organized around a shared purpose. Reach out first rather than waiting. Use technology as a bridge while prioritizing in-person contact. And acknowledge loneliness honestly rather than suppressing it. Loneliness is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is a signal, and like all signals, it exists to be heard and responded to. If this video helped you see loneliness differently, as the brain health issue it truly is, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for a new video every week on memory and cognitive health after 60. And leave me a comment. Do you feel you have enough genuine connection in your life right now? I read every single comment. See you in the next video.